Some mysteries are forgotten with time. A missing person case goes cold. A strange discovery is explained away. A witness is dismissed. But every once in a while, a case comes along that refuses to disappear. Cases where the evidence doesn't add up, where investigators are left with more questions than answers, where the final report ends with the same unsettling conclusion. There is no explanation. Tonight, we're exploring 5 unexplained cases that still keep investigators awake at night. From disappearances with no trace to encounters that challenge everything we think we know, these are the mysteries that continue to haunt those who tried to solve them. Turn down the lights, settle in, and welcome to the Unexplained Hour. The disappearance of Maura Murray, the girl who vanished into the night. Some disappearances leave behind clues, a trail of evidence, a clear beginning, and an ending. But every once in a while, someone vanishes in a way that leaves investigators with more questions than answers. A person is seen one moment, and the next, they're gone. Tonight, we begin with one of the most haunting missing person cases in modern history, the disappearance of Maura Murray, a 21-year-old college student who vanished on a cold February night in New Hampshire, leaving behind only a crashed car, a few scattered clues, and a mystery that has remained unsolved for more than 2 decades. This is the disappearance of Maura Murray. On February 9, 2004, Maura Murray was a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. By all accounts, she was a driven young woman with a promising future ahead of her. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, something seemed different. Something was wrong. On February 5th, Maura received news that her grandfather, who she was very close with, had suffered a medical emergency. She traveled home to visit her family. Then, just days later, an unusual series of events began. On February 7th, Maura was involved in a minor car accident. The crash wasn't serious, but it added another layer of stress to an already difficult period. That same weekend, she was dealing with personal struggles, including concerns involving her relationship and her future. Then, on February 9th, Maura sent an email to her professors and her employer. The message explained that she would be away for a week due to a family emergency, but investigators would later discover something strange. There was no known family emergency, and nobody seemed to know where she planned to go. Later that day, Maura packed up her belongings. She withdrew approximately $280 from her bank account. She purchased alcohol, and she left campus. What happened next remains one of the biggest questions in the case. At approximately 7:27 p.m., Maura's 1996 Saturn was traveling along Route 112 in the small town of Haverhill, New Hampshire. The road was dark, the temperature was freezing, and the area was surrounded by thick woods. Then, something happened. Maura lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a snowbank near the weathered barn corner area. A nearby resident heard the crash and looked outside. They saw Maura standing beside her vehicle. She appeared to be okay. No major injuries, no signs of panic, but something about the scene was unusual. A passing bus driver stopped and approached Maura. According to reports, he asked if she needed help. Maura reportedly told him she had already contacted roadside assistance, but investigators later determined that no call had been made. The bus driver returned home and called police. Just minutes later, a police officer arrived, but Maura Murray was gone. Not missing days later. Not missing after someone noticed she hadn't shown up. Gone within minutes. When police arrived at the scene, they found Maura's car still there. Inside were several strange clues: her cell phone, her credit cards, her backpack, her textbooks, a box of wine that had spilled inside the vehicle, and a printed email with directions to a condominium rental area. But there was no sign of Maura. No footprints leading into the woods, no confirmed sightings, no explanation. The search began immediately. Dogs were brought in. Teams searched the surrounding area, but the trail seemed to disappear almost instantly. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Maura's disappearance is the timeline. The crash happened around 7:27 p.m. The police officer arrived around 7:46 p.m. That leaves roughly 10 to 15 minutes where Maura could have walked away from the scene. But where could she have gone? The road was isolated. The temperatures were dangerously cold, and investigators believe she likely would not have survived long outside without proper clothing. Yet, despite extensive searches, no trace of her has ever been found. Over the years, countless theories have emerged. Some believe Maura left the crash scene willingly and was picked up by someone passing by. Others believe she may have accepted a ride from someone who intended to harm her. Some have questioned whether she was running away from her life and planned the disappearance herself, and others believe something happened to her in those few moments between the crash and the arrival of police. But every theory leads back to the same unanswered question. Where did Maura Murray go? More than 20 years later, her family continues to search for answers. Her disappearance has become one of the most investigated missing person cases in the United States, a case discussed by investigators, journalists, and amateur detectives around the world. But despite all the attention, despite all the theories, despite all the searching, one question remains. On a quiet road in New Hampshire, on a freezing February night, a young woman stepped away from her damaged car and disappeared. The Dyatlov Pass incident, the hikers who vanished into the night. In the winter of 1959, 10 experienced hikers entered one of the most remote and unforgiving regions of the Soviet Union. They were young, skilled, and prepared for the dangers of the frozen Ural Mountains, but only one of them would return home. The others would become part of one of the strangest mysteries in history. A mystery that began with a tent left behind in the snow, a trail of footprints disappearing into the darkness, and 9 people who seemed to have fled from something they were never able to escape. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. In January of 1959, a group of students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute began a difficult hiking expedition across the northern Ural Mountains. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student with extensive hiking experience. Along with him were 8 other hikers, all trained in winter survival and mountain travel. Their goal was to complete a challenging route through the wilderness and earn a prestigious hiking certification. The group documented their journey through photographs and journals. The images show what appears to be a normal expedition: friends laughing, snow-covered mountains, a group of young people preparing for an adventure. But those would become the last known photographs of them alive. One member of the group, Yuri Yudin, became sick shortly after the expedition began. He made the difficult decision to turn back. At the time, it seemed like an unfortunate change of plans, but that decision saved his life. Yudin would become the only member of the group who would ever return from the journey. The other 9 continued deeper into the mountains, and on February 1st, they reached a mountain slope that would later become known as Dyatlov Pass. There, they set up their tent. That night, according to investigators, something happened. Something caused 9 experienced hikers to abandon the one thing that could protect them from the deadly cold: their shelter. When the group failed to return as scheduled, a search party was sent out. On February 26th, rescuers discovered their tent, and immediately, something seemed wrong. Inside were their belongings, their food, their equipment, their warm clothing, everything they needed to survive. But the hikers were gone. The tent had been cut open from the inside, not carefully opened, not packed up, cut, as if the people inside believed they needed to escape immediately. Outside, investigators found a trail of footprints leading away from the campsite. Some appeared to belong to people wearing only socks. Others showed signs that some hikers may have been barefoot, in temperatures that dropped far below freezing. The decision to leave the tent made no sense, unless something had frightened them badly enough that staying felt even more dangerous. The first bodies were found near a cedar tree roughly a mile away from the tent. 2 hikers were discovered without proper clothing, believed to have attempted to start a fire for warmth. They had died from exposure, but the mystery only deepened when more bodies were discovered weeks later. Several of the hikers had suffered severe injuries: broken ribs, a fractured skull, damage that seemed inconsistent with a simple accident. Some injuries were so unusual that they fueled decades of speculation about what really happened on that mountain. Over the years, many theories have been proposed. One of the most widely discussed explanations is an avalanche. The idea is that the hikers heard or felt something threatening near their tent, panicked, cut their way out, and fled downhill. A modern review of the evidence has suggested that a type of snow slab collapse could explain parts of the incident. But many people still question the theory. Why did the hikers leave without proper clothing? Why did they not return to the tent once they realized they were in danger? And what could have caused a group of experienced outdoorsmen to make such a fatal decision? Other theories have suggested military involvement, secret weapons testing, or unexplained lights seen in the area around the same time. However, none of these theories have ever been proven. The official explanation today is that a natural event, most likely a snow-related incident, caused the tragedy. But for many, questions remain, because the strangest part of the Dyatlov Pass incident is not just how they died. It is what happened in those final moments before they did. 9 people entered the mountains. They had experience, they had equipment, they knew how to survive. Yet something caused them to leave behind their shelter, their supplies, and their chance of survival. More than 60 years later, the mountain still holds the secret of what truly happened that night. The Sodder children, the family that lost 5 children, but never found their bodies. Some mysteries are terrifying because of what we discover. Others are terrifying because of what we never find. On Christmas Eve 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, a family went to sleep expecting to wake up to presents, laughter, and a normal Christmas morning. Instead, they woke up to a nightmare, a house fire, 5 missing children, and a mystery that nearly 80 years later still has no clear answer. This is the story of the Sodder children, the 5 children who vanished in the middle of the night, and whose family spent the rest of their lives searching for the truth. In 1945, George and Jenny Sodder lived in Fayetteville, West Virginia, with their 10 children. George was an Italian immigrant who had built a successful trucking business, and the family was well known in their community. By all accounts, they were a normal family, but there was one thing that made George stand out. He was outspoken, especially about politics. Years earlier, George had gotten into arguments with people who disagreed with his views, and some believe those disagreements may have played a role in what happened that Christmas Eve. But at the time, no one in the family thought they were in danger. On the night of December 24th, the Sodders celebrated Christmas like many families did. The children played with their new toys. The house was filled with excitement. Eventually, the younger children went upstairs to bed. George and Jenny went to sleep downstairs, and sometime in the middle of the night, everything changed. Around 12:30 in the morning, Jenny Sodder woke up. She heard a strange noise above her, a sound she later described as something hitting the roof. Not long after, she noticed something was wrong. The house was on fire. George and Jenny immediately rushed to save their children. 6 children managed to escape, but 5 children remained upstairs. 12-year-old Maurice, 8-year-old Martha, 7-year-old Louis, 5-year-old Jenny, and 14-year-old Betty. George tried to reach them. He ran back into the burning house, but the smoke and flames forced him out. He tried using a ladder to reach the second-floor windows, but the ladder was missing. He attempted to start his trucks and drive them closer to the house, but both vehicles mysteriously failed to start. Neighbors arrived and tried to help, but by the time firefighters reached the scene, the house was already destroyed. The assumption was simple. The 5 children had died inside. But then, something strange happened. When investigators searched through the remains of the Sodder home, they expected to find evidence of the children, bones, personal belongings, anything that could confirm what happened. But they found almost nothing. No remains of the 5 children were ever discovered. The fire chief claimed the intense heat must have destroyed their bodies, but many people questioned that explanation. Because the house had burned quickly, but not completely, and investigators later found objects that should have survived a fire of that size: metal items, household appliances, even pieces of furniture. So the Sodder family began asking a question that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. How could 5 children disappear without leaving a trace? As the years went on, the Sodders began believing that the fire was not an accident. They discovered several strange details. Before the fire, a man had reportedly stopped by their home and warned George that his house would burn down. Another incident involved a man who attempted to buy life insurance from George. When George refused, The man allegedly threatened him. Then there was the night of the fire itself. The family reported hearing a loud object hit the roof shortly before the flames started. Later, they found what they believed may have been a possible clue, a strange object in the yard that some believed could have been a firebomb. There was also the issue of the missing ladder. The ladder that George normally kept near the house was found hundreds of feet away after the fire. Exactly how it got there remains unknown, but perhaps the most mysterious part of the case came after the fire, because the Sodders began receiving reports that their children may have survived. Years later, they received a photograph in the mail. The picture showed a young man who looked remarkably similar to their missing son, Louis. On the back was a mysterious message: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys. The Sodders believed the photo might be evidence that at least one of their children had grown up somewhere else. They also received reports from people claiming they had seen the children after the fire. Some witnesses said they saw children matching their descriptions being taken away in a vehicle. Others claimed they saw children who resembled the Sodder children in distant cities, but none of these sightings were ever confirmed. Over the years, several theories emerged. The official explanation was that the children died in the fire and their remains were destroyed. Some believe that is exactly what happened. Others believe the fire was intentionally started and that the children were kidnapped. Some theories suggest it may have been connected to conflicts involving George Sodder. Others believe the children may have been taken by someone who wanted to hide their identity, and some believe the family's search uncovered enough strange details that the official explanation simply doesn't answer every question. The Sodder parents never stopped searching. They placed billboards around West Virginia asking for information about their missing children. They investigated every lead. They kept photographs of their children displayed for decades. Jenny Sodder reportedly never accepted that her children were gone. She believed they were alive somewhere, waiting to come home. George and Jenny spent the rest of their lives trying to solve a mystery that began on Christmas Eve, 1945. A mystery with no bodies, no confirmed explanation, and no final answer. Today, the Sodder house is gone. The children were never found. And somewhere between the ashes of that Christmas night and the decades of unanswered questions, 5 children disappeared, leaving behind one of America's strangest unsolved mysteries. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Disappearances. The keepers who vanished without a trace. Far out in the North Atlantic, where the waves crash against jagged cliffs and storms can appear without warning, there is a small group of islands that have earned a terrifying reputation: the Flannan Isles. For centuries, these remote islands were known only to sailors brave enough to pass through their dangerous waters. But in December of 1900, they became the center of one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in maritime history. Because one night, 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared. No bodies were ever found. No evidence of what happened was ever discovered. And to this day, no one knows exactly what occurred inside the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. This is the story of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse Disappearances. The Flannan Isles are a group of small, isolated islands located about 20 miles west of the Isle of Lewis in Scotland. They are often called the Seven Hunters, a name that reflects the island's dangerous reputation. The land itself is unforgiving. Steep cliffs rise hundreds of feet above the ocean. The waters surrounding the islands are filled with hidden rocks and unpredictable currents. For sailors, the Flannan Isles were a place to avoid. But for lighthouse keepers, they were a place of duty. But keeping that light burning came at a cost. In 1899, a lighthouse was completed on the largest island, Island Maura. Standing nearly 75 feet tall, the lighthouse was built to guide ships safely through one of the most dangerous stretches of ocean in Scotland. The men stationed there would spend weeks at a time completely isolated from civilization. Their only company was the sound of the waves, the wind, and the endless darkness surrounding them. In December of 1900, 3 men were assigned to the lighthouse. James Ducat, the principal keeper, an experienced lighthouse worker known as a dependable and responsible man. Thomas Marshall, an assistant keeper who had years of experience maintaining lighthouses. And Donald MacArthur, a replacement keeper who had taken the place of another worker. The 3 men settled into their routine. Their job was simple: maintain the light, keep the equipment working, survive the isolation. But after December 15th, something changed. On December 15th, the steamship Archtor passed near the Flannan Isles. The crew noticed something unusual. The lighthouse light was not visible. At the time, this was concerning. A lighthouse was not supposed to go dark. But because the weather conditions were rough and communication with the island was difficult, no immediate investigation was launched. Days passed. The lighthouse remained silent. Then, on December 26th, a relief ship called the Hesperus arrived at the island. Captain James Harvey expected to see the lighthouse keepers waiting at the dock. They weren't. The ship sounded its horn. No response. A signal flare was fired. Still nothing. Eventually, one of the relief workers, Joseph Moore, was sent ashore to investigate. What he found was disturbing. The lighthouse was completely empty. Inside the lighthouse, everything appeared strangely normal. There were no signs of a struggle. No evidence of violence. No damage. The men's belongings were still there. Their clothes remained inside. Their personal items had not been taken. Even their meals appeared to suggest that they had left unexpectedly. But one discovery immediately caught investigators' attention. The kitchen table was reportedly left in disarray, and one of the chairs had been overturned. A small detail, but one that fueled years of speculation. Why would 3 experienced lighthouse keepers suddenly leave the safety of the lighthouse, especially during dangerous weather? Investigators also examined the lighthouse logbook. The final entries created even more questions. According to the records, the men described terrifying weather conditions, heavy storms, violent winds, huge waves crashing against the island. The entries suggested that the men were experiencing some of the worst weather they had ever seen. But there was a problem. Weather reports from the mainland did not match the descriptions. The storms recorded in the logbook did not appear to have happened. This raised a chilling possibility. Were the entries altered? Were the men experiencing something unusual? Or were the reports simply misunderstood? Over the years, countless theories have attempted to explain the disappearance. The most common explanation is that a massive wave swept the men into the ocean. The lighthouse sat on a dangerous cliffside. A storm could have sent waves hundreds of feet high over the rocks. One possibility is that one of the men went outside to secure equipment, was hit by a wave, and the others followed to try to help. A single massive wave could have taken all 3 men away, but some people believe the evidence doesn't fully support this. If they were preparing for bad weather, why would they leave without proper clothing? Why were certain items left behind? And why was there no trace of their bodies? Other theories are far more mysterious. Some have suggested that the men were involved in a violent confrontation. Others have claimed they were victims of something supernatural. Stories began circulating that the island was haunted. Some believe the lighthouse itself carried a dark history, pointing to old legends that the islands were once considered cursed. There were even rumors that the men had been taken by unknown forces from the sea. But the isolation of the island left room for imagination. The 3 lighthouse keepers were never found. No remains ever washed ashore. No explanation was ever confirmed. The official conclusion was that the men were likely swept away by the sea. But more than a century later, the mystery remains. 3 men arrived at a remote lighthouse. The light went dark. The island went silent. And somehow, 3 experienced lighthouse keepers vanished, leaving behind only an abandoned station, a few unanswered questions, and one of the strangest disappearances in maritime history. Because sometimes the most terrifying stories are not the ones where something is found. It's the ones where nothing is. The Bennington Triangle, the place where people vanish. Deep in the mountains of Vermont lies a stretch of wilderness where, for decades, strange stories have followed those who enter. A place where hikers disappeared without a trace, where witnesses reported seeing things they couldn't explain, and where 5 people vanished over the course of just 5 years. The area became known as the Bennington Triangle, a name inspired by another famous mystery, the Bermuda Triangle. But unlike the ocean mystery that captured the world's imagination, the Bennington Triangle was real, a remote area of forests, mountains, and forgotten trails, where people walked in and never came back. This is the story of the Bennington Triangle. The Bennington Triangle is located around the area of Glastonbury Mountain in southern Vermont. Today, the mountain is covered in dense forests and surrounded by wilderness. But in the early 1900s, the area had a very different reputation. The town of Glastonbury was once a thriving logging community. But after the logging industry declined, the population slowly disappeared. By the 1930s, Glastonbury had become nearly abandoned. The empty buildings were reclaimed by the forest, the roads became overgrown, and the surrounding mountains became isolated once again. For locals, there was something unsettling about the area. Stories began circulating about strange lights in the sky, unusual sounds coming from the woods, and people who entered the wilderness and never returned. Then, in the 1940s, the disappearances began. On November 12, 1945, a 74-year-old hunting guide named Mitty Rivers led a group of hunters through the mountains. Rivers knew the area better than almost anyone. He had spent years guiding people through the Vermont wilderness. He was familiar with the trails, he understood the terrain, and he knew how dangerous the mountains could be. During the trip, Rivers walked ahead of the group. At some point, he separated from the others, and that was the last time anyone ever saw him. Search parties spent days combing through the area. They searched forests, streams, trails, but Rivers was gone. The only clue ever discovered was a single rifle cartridge found near a stream. No body, no evidence of an accident, no explanation. An experienced outdoorsman had simply vanished. 5 years later, another disappearance would bring national attention to the area. On December 1, 1946, an 18-year-old college student named Paula Weldon left campus for a hike. She was walking along the long trail near Glastonbury Mountain. Witnesses reported seeing her walking along the road. One person even gave her directions toward the trail. But after that, Paula disappeared. She never returned to college. She never contacted her family, and despite one of the largest searches in Vermont history, no trace of her was ever found. The investigation attracted attention from across the country. Her disappearance led to criticism over the lack of local resources and eventually contributed to the creation of the Vermont State Police. But for Paula's family, there was never an answer. Just 1 year later, another person vanished. On October 12, 1949, 8-year-old Paul Jepson disappeared while traveling with his mother. According to reports, his mother stopped briefly near a roadside area while working. Paul was left nearby. When she returned, he was gone. Authorities launched a massive search. Hundreds of people searched the woods. Dogs were brought in. Planes searched from above. But again, nothing was found. An 8-year-old child had disappeared from an area that had been searched repeatedly, and the mystery surrounding Glastonbury Mountain only grew. The disappearances continued. In 1950, a woman named Frida Langer vanished while hiking with her cousin. During the hike, she reportedly fell into a stream. She returned to camp to change clothes, but she never made it back. Searchers spent weeks looking for her. Then, in one of the strangest developments in the entire mystery, her body was found months later, in an area that had already been searched extensively. Authorities were unable to determine exactly what happened, but the discovery raised more questions than answers. The final disappearance associated with the Bennington Triangle involved a man named James Tedford. In 1949, Tedford boarded a bus returning home. Passengers reported seeing him on the bus, but when the vehicle arrived at its destination, he was gone. His belongings remained behind. His luggage was still there, but Tedford had vanished somewhere between stops. Over the years, many theories have attempted to explain the disappearances. The most realistic explanation is that the wilderness itself was responsible. Glastonbury Mountain is a dangerous area. Dense forest can make navigation nearly impossible. Weather conditions can change quickly, and even experienced hikers can become lost. Some believe the victims suffered accidents that simply left behind no evidence. Others believe there may have been a human explanation, a predator, a criminal, or someone hiding information. But the lack of evidence has kept those theories from being proven. Of course, the Bennington Triangle has also attracted more mysterious explanations. Some claim the area has unusual energy. Others point to Native American legends about the mountain being a place of strange activity. There are stories of strange lights appearing over the trees, unexplained sounds echoing through the wilderness, and even reports of a mysterious creature sometimes called the Bennington Monster. But like many legends, separating fact from fiction has become almost impossible. 5 people disappeared, 5 lives interrupted, 5 families left without answers. The forests of Vermont hold many secrets. And somewhere among the trees of Glastonbury Mountain, the truth behind these disappearances may still be waiting. Maybe the answer is simple. Maybe it was accidents, bad luck, and the dangers of the wilderness. Or maybe there is something about that mountain that we still don't understand. Five stories, 5 mysteries, and 5 reminders that there are still things in this world we cannot explain. From the disappearance of Maura Murray, to the impossible conditions surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident, from the unanswered questions of the Sodder children, to the lighthouse keepers who vanished from the Flannan Isles, and the strange disappearances hidden within the forests of the Bennington Triangle. Each case leaves behind more questions than answers. Some may have explanations waiting to be discovered. Others may remain mysteries forever. But perhaps that is what makes these stories so haunting. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the unknown, subscribe to The Night Shift and join us for more stories from the unexplained. Until next time, keep your lights on, stay curious, and remember, some stories are forgotten, but some mysteries never let us forget them.